Hello and welcome to PM Express. And what are we talking about today? Ghana's credit rating. Well, now there are institutions in the world that gather all data and statistics of all countries, and they put it together, and then they analyze as to which country is worth to invest in. And they put it on the, on the net. And so I'm sure investors from all over the world will go to this institution's database to find out, if I want to put money somewhere, where do I go? So we have Moody's, Fitch, and you have Standards and Poor. Now, Standards and Poor says that once upon a time Ghana was negative B, but now they've taken the negative out and now we are B. Now, as a layman who's going to be taught economics today to understand what this whole figure is about, as a Ghanaian, if you wake up in the morning and you see this, do you put on your white shirt and white trousers, white handkerchief, and say, "Hooray, we are there"? Because here we are with bankers being laid off. Every other phone call is a hospital bill, transportation, somebody somewhere calling for help. Generally, there isn't any cash in the system, as everybody, most people are lamenting. And then somebody comes and says, "Oh, don't worry, you're doing fine, you are B." Like, should we be concerned? Because, you look at it as if any time you get a pat on the back from Western institutions, it is because whatever it is you're doing benefits them and not you. That's how come you never get the IMF, coming in and say, "Look, get more educated people in the system, get more educated people in the system." No, all they'll come and tell you, "Look, just cut the people you're employing, save some money and pay me." Should we be happy as a country to be a grade B? Or should we look within and say, "Look, forget about this B. We are marking ourselves F and we need to work harder"? But I have somebody who understands economic, and so he would educate us. And then if you are just as confused as I am, within the hour, you will be educated. So don't go away at all. My name is Nana Nsakwa, the 4th Chief of the Little Republic of Akomo Edumasa. Today we're going to have a little lesson on what the B rating of our economy means. Do not go away. None other than Dr. Lord Mensah, Senior Lecturer, University of Ghana Business School. If anybody knows where this B came from, he has an idea. Doc, thank you so much. I must say, Doc had a lecture, he had to finish and run here. And that's what I call commitment, to God and country. So we are very grateful, Doc. Sure. And then joining us soon will be Courage Kwesi Buti, who's also an economic analyst, who will join us very soon. So do not go away. It's going to get very interesting. These two gentlemen will definitely point out where the B came from. But Doc, I'll start with you. As a Ghanaian and a patriotic citizen, what do I do? White powder, white handkerchief?
Yeah, I mean, it is a good signal. To be at B- and then moving to B. It shows basically that, at the macro front, we've been doing well. If you look at the information that these agencies need to compute this rating, it's basically macro information. If my memory serves me right, I know there's an input on your monetary policy management assessment. There's an input on the fiscal discipline assessment. There is an input on the institutions that are within your country, how they are performing, how they are politically aligned, and all those. Now, the last time Ghana was rated was somewhere October 2017, which means on a yearly basis we get rated based on the information and how we've adjusted in terms of all these indicators that I've mentioned earlier. Now, if you take the S&P rating, it's basically all these indicators categorized from 1 to 6, 1 being the best and 6 being the least. So they assess your economy, give you some ratings, and then later on they find the average weighting. And with all this input, they come out with a rating which is a B. Now, the B tells you that we are in a speculative region. And of course, it was indicated that it is a B, but then it is B stable, not necessarily B positive. And if you look at the caveats that they use in hitting on the B stable, they indicated that the economy relies on exports, for which possibly going forward we might have some shocks. How we manage through those shocks will determine how stable we can be. And then also they also mentioned, the ability to generate revenue in the economy, and then how we service our debt. And of course, servicing of debt is one of the main bane of this economy. Now, the economy in itself in general, I remember in 2017, with all the macro indicators, remember, this rating is basically on macro indicators, not at the individual level, not a survey that will go house to house to measure, to ask people, how are you doing in your life? At the end of the day, what you bought last month, were you able to buy the same thing this month with your salary? Has your consumption been smoothing over the months that has passed? It's not a survey of that type. It's a survey that is at the aggregated level, where we're looking at the nation in general, how it has been performing with all these indicators that I mentioned earlier. Now, this rating has come out all right, which is a B. It's fantastic. It's the upper part of the speculative region. And I'm not so enthused on this rating because if you look at since 2003 that we've been rated by Fitch, Moody's, and S&P, you could see that we lack that capability of maintaining our rating. And we need to understand that globally, day in and day out, investors are getting sophisticated. In your introduction, you mentioned that this is the kind of information investors look on to maybe deposit or bring investment into your country. Now, basically, I would not say this rating, just a slip into the B for now, will move investment into Ghana, because Ghana in itself, if you look at the rating patterns since 2003, clearly it tells you that the environment is quite risky. So all the investment that comes into Ghana, maybe they anticipate supernormal profit, because of course in an environment that is risky, if you are going to put your money, you require kind of profit that is beyond the average that every investor will require. So if we run through the ratings, we've been at B- before, we've been at B+ before, and we've been, all these regions are what we call the speculative regions. And there are regions that the consistency matters within this region. Now, Ghana has not been able to maintain its rating for 4 consecutive times before, not in the lifetime of this, since we started engaging this rating agencies. So I believe that, if we are talking about assurance, talking about an economy where in future investors will look on and confidently bring investment here to benefit Ghanaians, then possibly we need to work hard to ensure that consistently we keep ourselves, above the waters. Keeping the B rating all through, maybe for about 4 consecutive times, will bring assurance. Let me also highlight on this. You see, when you take these ratings across over time, we normally compute something we call transition probabilities, for which we look at how frequently you've transit between different ratings. And you could see clearly that Ghana has a strong transition probability, which shows that it's a quite risky environment. We lack that capability of, ensuring that we keep a run of, possible rating. And so if you ask me in details, these are the basics that I can give you on this rating. It's not necessarily something that will measure your standard of living. We need to understand from this platform that, there's a difference between economic growth and economic development. Now, globally, we're moving towards economic growth that will transform into development, for which we're looking at growth that is inclusive, pro-poor growth. Growth that you can say the economy is doing well today. At the end of the day, if I go to market, I went to market last month. This month, my salary is able to purchase the same thing. And in the end, going forward, I presume that is the same thing that I'll be able to purchase. So therefore, if I'm planning for my savings, I can consistently think about a savings that will help me cater for the future. A savings that I can be sure what will come out of the future will be positive. So it's not, at the individual level, what do you call it, engagement, but rather it's at the macro front.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick break now and come back because I have a few more questions to ask with regards to this macro level thing, because you look at our GDP until now, if you ask the experts how much of our GDP truly belongs to us, because a huge majority of it is not ours. Somebody is coming to make his investment, and when he yields, he takes it away. So when we are being rated, are we rated based on that as well, or they have deducted what they have taken out and what's left is what we are being rated on? Don't go away, we're coming back. Well, thank you very much. And we're looking at Ghana's new B rating, what it means, so we understand it. Joining us now is Courage Kwesiboti, who is no stranger to the show at all, an economic analyst. Courage, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Good. Well, Courage, I think since you are here, let me, fire at you. Our doc has done a lot of education in letting us know that the B rating is on a macro level and not micro. So however I buy my Kubi or Kinky has got nothing to do with this rating. But does this rating take into account, like if you look at our GDP, of what is it now, 100 billion or 41 billion dollars? How much of this 41 billion is really ours, and how much of it is foreign investors who are going to, repatriate their flight? Is what is left that give us that B rating, or they take into account the ones that are invested? How do they do it?
Thank you, and a very good evening to our listeners. It's a positive surprise. I mean, for me, I think Doc has spoken extensively about the rating and then the factors that drove it. Really, when these rating agencies are looking at these things, they are not looking at even the size of your GDP. They look at the annual growth in your GDP as a test of the resilience or of the growth that you're experiencing year after year. And so if you read the report, you realize that they kept hammering that there's robust growth, and that is because we recorded 8.5% growth last year. Normally, at the steady state, the economy is expected to be growing around 5% for our kind of economy. That is our trend growth. And so if you are doing anything around that or slightly above it, it's considered robust. Now, as to the sources of that GDP, whether it's internal or external, it's a different discussion, because we believe that at our level of development, you don't have enough of the domestic capital to finance your growth. And that is how come. And one theme that ran through their report is a fiscal risk that we face in the midst of consolidation, in the midst of government trying to tighten up, and then revenues not performing so much. How is government going to finance the growth enhancing programs that they have in their budget? Focus shift to private sector, and then the local private sector, do they have the capacity to finance the kind of growth we're looking for, the kind of development we're looking for? I don't think we have sufficient internally. And so normally you will look for the China, you will look for those other foreign partners that have the resources but are looking for places to invest them. So when they are looking at this classifications, really, they are looking at it, the growth, the strength of your growth. He mentioned institutions, the kind of institutions you have, and then the level at which they are performing. They talk about your fiscal risk and then your debt, external debt exposure, and then of course your debt portfolio as a whole. And then they talk about monetary policy development. It appears that in this particular rating, the major driver has been the advancement we have seen in monetary policy transmission, the effectiveness of that transmission so far. So it begs the question for me, as I said here, that credit rating is really like you are an individual client of a bank, you go for loan, and so their assessment of your ability to pay or otherwise of the debt you owe them is actually how much they rate you, and that is what the credit bureaus that do internally. Out there, Fitch, S&P, Moody's, they are kind of the internationally acclaimed rating agencies that put every other country out there to say this is what their risk rating is. This is what we feel the ability to default or otherwise or pay for your loans that you give them and all of that is. And then so for me, logically, the most thing or the thing that should weigh more in that analysis should be the fiscal exposure, because that is where your ability to service that debt could be found. We're talking of things like your debt to GDP ratio, what level it is. I mean, the higher it is, it begs the question of debt sustainability. Your fiscal deficit, how much deficit you run each year. In other words, how much you needed to borrow every year to finance the gap between your revenue and expenditure for any given year. Your primary balance, I mean, your revenue you generate as against your induced or, non-discretionary expenditure for any given year. Are you able to cover those with the revenue you raise internally? Those actually determine the level of you or your ability to service the debt. And then so for S&P to outline all of those risks, but yet go ahead to rate our country, improve our rating, it's a pleasant surprise, yes, but I would, like a colleague describing in the office this afternoon, that and it comes to this thing comes to mind, the Real Madrid versus Juventus match at the Santiago Bernabeu Champions League semi-final. Madrid is facing elimination. Marco Asensio or whoever, Lucas Vazquez got pushed down, and then yes, he's pushed down, the referee awards a penalty. Is it really a penalty? It's a question for all of us to ask, or debate about. But obviously, I'm not saying this to mean that there hasn't been improvement. We've seen some considerable improvement on the fiscal front from 2017 till date. We've seen improvement in the fiscal deficit coming down from 9.3% to around 6% last year. We've seen us running primary surplus for the first time in a long time. We've seen improvement in our current account position. We've seen a lot of improvement, I think, on the fiscal front. And even while revenue performance is still a challenge, programs are being put in place. And I read, not long ago, that a consultancy from, I think, outside is even engaged to help us improve the revenue mobilization platform. So really, they are working towards that. Monetary policy, we've made some dramatic gains since, I think, March last year, or I think somewhere 2016, where inflation peaked at some 19.2 or so percent. We have sustainably, except for a few months of blips, have been on the path of decline, thanks to the effectiveness of monetary policy. And that is the trend that seems to be going on now with the ongoing reforms.
We go to the petrol station every day, prices are going up. They say, oh, don't worry, inflation is coming down. With
the ongoing reforms in the financial sector, really, it can only improve that monetary policy effectiveness. So on that scores, I give it to them. But when the fiscal risk is actually the determinant of your ability to service your debt, is monetary gains enough to get an upgrade, or probably just maintaining or affirming your rating is what we needed? That is up for debate.
Good. Let me bring Doc in here. Doc, from listening to his explanation, it's like going to get a mortgage and you get your wife to put his money through your bank account.
Sure.
So you have joint wages, and then you look like you're earning, earning more money, and then you go in for a mortgage. I mean, do we run that risk? Because in this GDP are other people's, investment, which is not going to be the money. They're not going to give us that money to go and service our debt.
Sure.
So, I mean, are we running the risk of having like a inflated bank account?
With the rating, it was clear that what belongs to us, were identified. Okay. What belongs to us is basically the export that we do and tied it to the global market. They see that to be an exposure for which, if we don't manage that very well, there's a likelihood that we might slip from that, even the B stable that we find ourselves now. Now, if you look at this rating going forward, I would say that the data they used ended up somewhere earlier this year. Because if you consider the happenings in the past few months in the banking sector, the exposures that we've had, it brings into question the stability of our institution and how they are operating.
Doc, but
if it turns up that, okay.
If they factored all that in, then out of our 42 billion GDP and our 32 billion debt, how much of that 42 billion is our money? To say that this, because for all you know, it's only 20 billion that's ours, which means we actually owe more than we are making.
Yeah, as we speak now, we are not sitting by the numbers as it's supposed to be, but we cannot be specific. But I can tell you for a fact that, you see, even the 41 billion that we find ourselves on now is more or less includes oil. And we know very well how intensive in terms of capital the oil sector is, which Ghanaians, contribution is very, very minimal. So in the end, if you put all together, you will say that fine, as having an economy of such quantum, the retention, ratio is very, very minimal for Ghana. Therefore, going forward, that whole GDP will not belong to us per se. But then unless we get those who are sitting by the numbers to tell us exactly what belongs to Ghanaians.
So then the debt to GDP ratio, it's like, somebody's growing corn and you're also growing teeth because of someone who should be able to, basically somebody's growing corn, and as the corn is growing big, they're also growing big teeth because you're going to chew that corn. It looks like that sort of economy is what we are running. If people come and invest and it looks big, let's go and borrow because...
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you have FDIs, the benefit, is very enormous for the country. There are several means that you can retain more of this in your country. The fact that those investments are coming, I mean, of course, look at our corporate tax. It's about 25%, isn't it? Yes. So if you think of profit being generated and you have 25% of that being retained in the economy, obviously, at least you've divided whatever is generated into 4 to retain a part of it in your country. So the more we have it, the better it is for us. So we cannot say, and like Courage was saying, we cannot run on our own. The country need to leverage on the outside inflows, for us to build this economy, because the capacity we have in terms of financial resources is very, very minimal. I mean, for some time now, we should understand that. So therefore, we need foreign inflows to build up our economy. So if the rating has come and it encompasses both foreign funds and then local funds together to form our GDP, for me, I will not hold that much questions into that, because obviously once the economy is being built, part of that investment will be retained here.
You mentioned earlier that we've never stayed in this in a zone for 4 times. We're always yo-yoing back and forth, back and forth. Have we changed or added any structure, to make us a bit more stable now than before, or is the usual yo-yo that we are in there? Because the report says that it's still stable, as you said.
Yes, very good. I mean, yes, it's true. If you look at since 2003 that we started engaging these rating agencies, we've been, going back and forth within the speculative region, which is the B region, for some time now. And we've never consistently kept to even B minus for 4 consecutive times, and in itself, I say it's quite risky. And that is why I always hold my fort by saying that, the rating in itself does not really influence investment into Africa or into sub-Saharan Africa. The investor knows what he's coming for, and obviously that is the only place he can get it. That is why they come here. But the rating in itself, for me, looking at the dynamics in itself, is risky, because investment goes to an environment where there's certainty. And once you cannot be sure whether even the B plus that we have now, we can keep it going, you may not be sure of the economy in general. So obviously, I mean, it comes into question. But if you ask me of the structures that we've put in place, I believe that we are doing well. I mean, looking at the reports that came, The belief is that whatever is happening in our banking sector is a cleaning up, exercise for which going forward we might end up having a very strong, financial sector, and it is believed that that will help us grow the economy. And then also looking at some policies that the current administration tries to put in place. For instance, I've heard in grapevine that there's a possibility of a policy on fiscal deficit of about 5%, of our GDP on an annual basis. So anybody that goes beyond that, it becomes a flout against a law, which Parliament will approve that. And with that, I think it should be able to give the country some kind of orientation for which government comes, government goes. We should be able to keep to a certain level of discipline. And this should be able to help us, achieve a stable rating for consecutive times, and that will minimize
the likelihood. Does this law apply in election year?
Well, hopefully, hopefully, but if they will hold on to what they're saying, I mean, going forward, I think that should be able to put us in line. I mean, because most of the reason why possibly we are not able to keep to one trail of rating is the economic dynamics, and we normally, the politics is strongly tied to the performance of the economy, and until we develop, an independent policy that will guide us through our economic management, we will never, or we cannot, control, the way consistently we build up into this rating. And like I said, investors are getting sophisticated day in and day out. It's not about just 1 year slipping to B. I mean, no investor will look at that. I mean, how consistently have you been in B? I mean, is it 4 years back or 3 years back that you've been in B? Then it gives some certainty, because these are purely, alphabet built from your macro indicators. So if you keep on slipping back and forth, then it means that, I mean, obviously, you're not really doing something right. So therefore, kind of uncertainty in your environment.
Courage, if you were the finance minister, you wake up today, they're giving you a B, so well, you're doing something right. What should you do? Think, look, I now need to move to B+, put structures in place to move to B+, or just, wait for the next B? I mean, what do you do? I mean, do you maintain? Do you move up?
Thankfully, these rating agencies, they have a methodology they follow. They just don't do these things. They have categorizations and numbers you need to fall within to. And for me, that is my real problem with this very review. I sincerely thought it's premature. We all expect rating upgrade at some point because we are making gains, but are we there yet? The reason I'm saying this is this. For anyone getting a B, I mean, and hoping to get into a B+, per S&P themselves, their criteria, you should be running a debt to GDP ratio of something less than 60%. Are we there? No. Your annual debt accumulation, the net addition to your public debt, per their categorization, it should be below, I think, some 6%, or I think 5% thereabout. Currently, are we there? What is our external exposure, I mean, of the public debt? 53%. What is our debt, our interest payment as a percentage of, GDP? It's around 40%. S&P say it should be somewhere around 15%. Currently it's 40%, and even their long-term projection up to 2021 is around 30%. So if against this backdrop, you are upgrading Ghana based on monetary policy gains, you are only setting the ground for a slip in one side of the fiscal sector, then, well, we'll go back to reverse back to where we were. But to answer your question directly, it is not bad we have gotten an upgrade. Like Doc said, it will not necessarily trigger investment flows because, look, the disclaimer to these things that come out is that this is our rating, it's a private assessment. If you base on this and you invest and you lose, we are not liable. So investors know this, they are cautious of this, so they just don't take rating as, okay, you are AAA, triple B, so I'm going to invest there. They do their risk assessment also. internally, what are our risk assessment? What are the risks to investment in Ghana that foreigners should carry their capital and come here? Today, we are talking of currency depreciation, around 7.5% or so year to date on the interbank market. S&P acknowledge all of this, but yet didn't deem it an important determinant and coming to the conclusion they got to. Now, 1% depreciation in your currency, what would be the impact on public debt? And we are seeking to bring it below 60% of GDP. But we know that because our debt is heavily exposed to the foreign currencies, any percentage point depreciation has huge impact for the level of debt we accumulate. Not because we are borrowing fresh money, but because the currency is depreciating. And so for me, those are the risks we need to look at. If you look, yes, our trade account is in surplus. Last year we ran surplus. This year we are still in surplus year to date and all of that. But the question is, if tallow oil exports their crude oil, they bring the money back to Ghana, or the money is supposed to be repatriated and back to Ghana, then ultimately they will send it to wherever they want to send, where they declare their profit and all of that. The whole sum enters our balance of payments, in fact our trade account, and you record the surplus, but the whole thing doesn't belong to us. If Anglo Gold, they export their gold, the proceed comes back, the whole thing doesn't belong to us. So on paper, you have a trade surplus, but then in reality, the amount that you have to support your currency is not that same amount. So then you are exposed to currency pressures. Fiscal risk, we're talking a fiscal cap of 5%. And then I think what the finance minister should be doing really is that to take practical steps to stabilize the macro environment, in fact, the fiscal outlook, so that they can attract private capital. Because our part of the world, developing nation as we are, aggregate demand is driven largely by public expenditure. I mean, and then of course, growth and then infrastructure development is largely financed by the public sector, really, isn't it? And then so if your ability to mobilize internal revenue through taxes is not up there, and you are susceptible to price fluctuations on the international market, cocoa, gold, crude oil, you are heavily exposed to price fluctuations on those markets, then you are heavily exposed. And so what do? Stabilize your economy, do the minimum you can do, keep the fiscal rules in check, and then that will be a yardstick for foreigners to come in and invest in growth-enhancing sectors of your economy that will allow domestic private investors to commit their capital to long-term projects that could generate the employment you need, the revenues through taxes that you need, and then, of course, the aggregate demand we all need in the economy. So the focus, to me, the finance minister should be focusing on stabilizing the macroeconomy. Do the minimum. Yes, if you pass that legislation that imposes a fiscal limit of 5% annually, will you keep to that target in 2020? Next year, 2019, when election is approaching and probably the realities are dawning on you, will you still keep the expenditure tight? Because that was what we did in 2017. That is what we are doing in 2018 to maintain our fiscal target or to achieve our fiscal targets. If in 2019, expenditure, revenue is still underperforming, but then there is pressure, people are demanding they are one village, one dam, they are one village, one factory, they are a Dumasa road, and all of that. Will you still tighten expenditure? For me, that is where the real test to be, and then that is what they should be focusing on, that on the long-term sustainable basis, if the macroeconomy is stable, people would have confidence to invest.
No road, no vote. Put a barrier there. Find the money from somewhere. But
you might derail the whole.
You see now, Doc, are we tickling ourselves? You know, like making ourselves laugh, write the books, write the numbers in a way so it looks good, and you know we pat ourselves on the back.
I don't really believe that. Like I said, if you look at
no, but he's saying that look, you know, they sell the oil, they come and dump all the money in, you quickly record it, he takes his money away, and they say, oh look, I have a big balance sheet. He brings these things, you know. So aren't we deceiving ourselves, you know, into making ourselves look good?
We're not really deceiving ourselves, because if you look at, you know, our export as a country, you should expect that, I mean, it was financed. Those exports were financed. And obviously, you go into business, you need to understand that you pump in money, and in the end, when the proceeds comes, there will be deductions here and there. whatever you have to think about is the outcome of that export that will stay in Ghana. That is what we're looking at. Possibly we have been over concentrating so much on one area, for which I believe that we need to do more as a country. We've been managing very well, but then most of the approaches that we've been using against our foreign reserves and all those are basically on short-term basis. I mean, we need a policy guideline that will look deeper into the future, possibly devoid of political party, devoid of manifesto upon manifesto, so that at least the country will have an orientation towards that achievement. And in the end, that should be able to help us. And what I'm saying is that we should be able to try and identify our strength in terms of export, and then possibly diversify, our export base. If you look at the policies that the current administration used to, come to power, the manifesto, let me put it that way, you could see clearly an outline which, if it kicks in very well, it should be able to, put the economy into a space where our exports should be diversified. I'm looking at 1D, 1F, if we're able to target, non-traditional product, on the farms, we should be able to do more. So as a country, we need a policy guideline that will help us to have a strong macro front, for instance, when we're talking about interest rate thresholds, when we're talking about foreign exchange thresholds, when we're talking about fiscal discipline thresholds in terms of budget deficit here and there. I mean, these are things that we need to put in place and ensure that over the years we'll keep to it, devoid of any political party or the other. And that should be able to put us in as a country that will have long-term prospect, rather than that kind of knee-jerk, approach in solving economic problems here and there. And until we have those policies, we will not stop, moving up and down. If I should borrow your term, that's tickling ourselves here and there.
Look, let me stay with you. You see, as a layman, I find there are more, even though I believe in sloganeering to drive the people towards an agenda, I feel the slogan seems to just end there. As to the details of what we have to do to plug ourselves into 1D, 1F, I'm not sure, if you were to go out today and ask, what are you going to do with this 1D, 1F? We seem to just, we are waiting for it to happen. I don't know. I mean, what then happens? What factories, what size, what are they producing, so that even if it's carrot factory, so I start growing the carrots, so if this factory comes up, I can supply it with carrot. I mean, I don't know. It's just the slogan's fine, it's good. We've joined the bandwagon, and it seems to end there.
Oh, I don't see it to be ending there. Like I said, if we pick it as a national policy, not per se political parties' policy. I mean, if we adapt that as a national policy for which we can integrate it in our developmental agenda, we should be able to end somewhere without necessarily looking at it ending there. I presume that you are looking at it ending there because maybe you've tied it to a particular political color, and for which you know that by 4 years it will have a dim face, But I don't believe that.
But our history seems to suggest so.
Yeah, the history seems to suggest that. But then I believe that we have to find. That's why I said
even
we should try to.
Let's take the party thing out, because I think every reasonable person believes that, look, if every district is going to have a factory to employ and start manufacturing something, I don't even think even Lucifer will say it's a bad thing. Even Lucifer is going to agree this is a good thing. Yeah, but what I'm saying is, they say one district, one factory. I mean, so by now we should know that, look, in Esiojamai, your factory is going to be based on tilapia. So anybody doing something on tilapia, look, go ahead, because the factory coming will be tilapia. Maybe in Kolole, Kote, your factory is going to be. I mean, I don't know.
If I may intervene, Nana, you see, this whole thing, government is not saying they are building factories in every district. They are only serving as a conveyor belt kind of to stimulate interest in that, right? Government doesn't have the resources, and then government is not in the business of running factories in every district. Ultimately, they are selling the idea that this is the agenda, this is what we are seeking to promote. We can help you with feasibility studies, we can help you with land acquisition process, we will help you with, those other community-based resources you need to start up. But essentially, it's private men that are going to promote these businesses. These are not charity men or Father Christmases. They are investing for the sake of the return they will get. And so beyond the resources available, they must think of all the other factors that influence the citation of business and what business you do, including access to market, sources of raw materials, sources of power, water, other facilities that will make the business viable. So I like it the way it is now. Rather than rush, put up factories, and then after a year or two or a few months, there will be white elephant sitting there. Take time to do your research, find the resources and their sustainability, and then find stable source of capital that you could use to set up these factories. If it even takes all 4 years to build, say, 50 factories out of the 275, fantastic. And those 50 can stand on their feet and grow. People will get jobs. It's better than rushing to build factories for the sake of political slogan, and then in the end, they'll all end up like Commander.
Let me take a quick break here. But when I come back, what I am saying is that we all support. Let's say we start with 50. If there's one going to be in Esiojamai, me, the potential worker or supplier to the factory, should I just wait or should I start preparing so that as that information is trickling down, I know that, oh, there is an A factory coming here, and therefore I have to start planting B and supplying C, so that, or this factory will come and be, autonomous, live in a vacuum and won't need my help. Maybe I have to even educate my people so that they can get a job in that factory. Because if all these factories are working, I'm sure we'll move from B to B plus or something. I'm coming back.
We move to A.
Well, thank you very much for saying it's very interesting. We are looking at how it is that we can, stabilize our B rating, because S&P rating on Rwanda says they are B but stable. B rating but stable. We are B and shaky, so we are trying to be stable. And we all agree that if we have industries and factories producing, you will become a bit more stable. But I was, before talking about information trickling down, so that agents to these, factories would understand how it is they have to empower themselves or equip themselves to either work there, support, supply, transport, plug into the factories. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I am saying that it's not coming down effective enough.
Yes, possibly. I think that is where we lack as a country. When we do research, most of the time, we sort the information, but then in the end, how to communicate it becomes a problem. The example you give of where you have to hire somebody, the person is used to daily wages, where he has to be on the field after you pay him on by day basis, and then you end up telling him that you pay him on a monthly basis. You realize that that is not what he's used to. That is why the feasibility studies is very, very important. I mentioned some time ago on this 1D, 1F that, you see, there are some people within a certain enclave, maybe they see a particular natural resource around them, but that is not what they want to work with. And we also need to understand that the factories are not going to be factories that each district will have a complete cycle of production. I believe that some of these factories are going to feed on others. So I don't expect all of them to start at the same time. I'm expecting that possibly maybe by now we should have at least 20 in place, knowing very well that at least the raw materials for the 20 will be coming from maybe 1 or 2, 3 districts. Then that build up on the integrations across the district can be realized. But as we speak now, we don't seem to have anything. And that is the problem. I do accept that we have as a country. I mean, we need to communicate and communicate very well when it comes to what we find on the grounds.
Well, we've paid lip service into the structure of the economy. One of the things that the president was saying is that, oh, if you export raw materials, you don't get anything. You export raw materials, you don't get anything. I mean, are we really in the position to sit down and pick probably 5 items or 3 items and say this and this thing is not leaving here until it's finite production? Can the country do that, or global and free trade will not allow you to?
See, you determine your destiny, really. We are in a global economy here, integrated, and then we are trading, our capital markets are integrated and all of that. But really what you sell out to the market is what you want to sell, not what someone wants you to sell. Of course, your power in bargain plays a role, and then your ability to add values to the things you want to add value to and export also plays a role. And that's how come, look at the integrated aluminum or bauxite industry that they are talking about, the whole package. Look, the financial requirements needed to set up such a smelter, we can't afford it as a nation. You need someone to do it, right? So if you can't, if China...
Would that come out of the 2 billion, or that's...
No, it's not part of the 2 billion.
So we'll dig a bit more dynamite, bauxite to cover that?
That is a different process. They will open up bids, people will bid for it, and then at the end they'll select the strategic investor that would roll out all of this. But these are multi-billion, dollar projects which we can't finance by ourselves. So if Sino-Hydro were a bit greedy, per what we are told, that no, we don't want alumina, we want the bauxite in its raw form, and then we are constrained that we want that 2 billion, we may be forced to sell the bauxite in its raw form to them. But we are standing our ground in this deal that we want to process it at least to the first stage, extract the alumina out of it. Of course, when it comes to producing the aluminium and all those other final products of it, we can let you do that on your own. But from us, the minimum we could export is the alumina extracted from the bauxite. That requires capital. Our inability to roll out those capital projects is the reason we export the goods in the
I just pray that at least if somebody brings the capital, we will have the technology, and that we're just going to be getting.
So that's how countries grow, really. Technology transfer. When you see these things need to go with a coordinated strategy. The South Koreas, the Malaysians, and all of that, this is how they grew. They just don't bring you in as a strategic partner and then you come and do whatever you ought to do, keep it to yourself, close like that, and then go away. You have a minimum number of years to operate the asset. Normally on PPP basis, you are required by law and then by agreement, whatever terms bind you, to transfer some technology so that within some time, locals can do what you are doing. And that is how you grow your economy.
I think it's about bargaining power. Ghana, for now, I think we are picking something out of the past mistakes that we did. And I will not also fault, the leaders so much, because, most of this bargaining power depends on your financing ability. Now, most of these raw materials that we try to extract are normally capital intensive, for which, we don't have the capital. And the finance determines what we do to the product. Okay, so how we finance determines what we do to the product. Now, realizing and coming back to our senses, I think the bauxite deal, gives us kind of an open up to tell us that, okay, we can negotiate for value addition, when it comes to production of some of these, or extraction of some of these raw materials that we have in the country. Earlier, I think we failed to do so, and that is what has brought us to this level. And going forward, I presume our leaders will not go in for any contract of that form. Let me give you a typical example. You gave an example of Malaysia, where, even when an estate wants to develop an area, the road construction that leads to the area should be part of the contract. So for instance, if you look at where I live, there's an estate far deeper off the road. But then I ask myself, would this estate be able to sell if they don't do this road? And trust me, they've put up nice houses, but then the road that leads to the place, is quite problematic. And we failed to, negotiate some of these things in addition to, some of the, the resources we make available to our partners when we are going into, engagement, So I believe that going forward, we need to, pick up a whole lot from this, to ensure that we negotiate, and when we are negotiating, value addition should be, the upper hand of the whole negotiation.
Well, that's very, very interesting, and the conversation has just begun. I'll always give you this number, but before I give you the number, I want to say big condolences to Jones Painting and Talita Mensah, who lost their mom, who also happens to be like a mother to me, Margaret Vivian AEC, who comes from Edukrum, lives in Coastal City, Spintex. So Jones Painting, condolences to you and I, since we both have lost a mother. 024-366-2001, 024-366-2001. That's Tantees. So my shirt was styled by Tantees and the cloth from Woodin. So, get yourself a nice Woodin cloth and go to Tantees and get yourself a nice style. And big thank you to Accra Muslim Mission at Kolegono. Accra Muslim Mission at Kolegono. Wonderful hosting on Saturday when you hosted the Standpoint event. It was beautiful and very grateful. To my guests in studio, thank you so much. And we'll always be back to do this all over again. Thank you for watching.